Hello and welcome to this Beam Me Out video. Today we'll be focusing on paper 2 GCSE English Language and question 3, which is the how question. Be helpful if you can have access to a pen, some paper and your 100% sheets for paper 2. And here is a reminder of the question order and timings for paper 2. You begin with question 5, which is the writing section. This is imagine this. You spend 40 minutes on this question. You then move on to question 4. You compare the perspectives across two sources and you spend 30 minutes on this. You then move on to question 3, which is your how question, the focus of the video today. You spend 18 minutes on that. So that's 6 minutes more in comparison to the how question on paper 1. You then move on to question 1, identifying the statements that are true. You're spending 5 minutes on this. You then end with question 2, which is the summarise question, and you spend 12 minutes on this, which is summarising across both sources. Here is your 100% sheet for paper 2 reading. In box A, you have a reminder of the timings. In box B, your discourse markers. Box C, D and E, the methods that you may well use for this particular question. And here is the second side of your 100% sheet. Each box contains certain approaches for each question. We're focusing on box H today, so a reminder, we begin by identifying the focus of the question and we make sure that we identify the correct section of the source. When we highlight with the question and the focus in mind. We then begin with our thesis. Bearing in mind a thesis doesn't contain methods or quotations. We then identify 3 methods, 3 quotations and 3 effects. Remember, it is the effect where you will generate the most marks, so the analysis section is key. A reminder that we always link back to the question throughout. So this question assesses AO2. Explain, comment on and analyse how writers use language and structure to achieve effects and influence readers using relevant subject terminology to support their view. It's important to note here is a how question. You now need to only refer to source A from lines 27 to 40. Make sure you're looking at the correct source. There are 2 sources in paper 2 and you're looking at the correct section, lines 27 to 40. How does the writer use language to describe the coal tips? When we are reading, we are focusing on the writer's use of language to describe the coal tips. Remember that effect is going to give you the most marks, so it's really incredibly important that we focus on perceptive analysis in the effect. How do we do that? Actually, we need to be really precise, really specific. We need to think about what is the specific effect that the writer is trying to achieve through the use of prophetic fallacy, metaphor, words. And there are some stems at the bottom to help you. The writer and the use of implies, suggests, infers, invokes, furthermore. And then you can use because, but, so. Here's a reminder of how to tackle this particular question. Beginning with the focus, identifying the focus of the question and the correct source, so knowing that you're looking at source A, and the correct section of that source, highlighting the relevant language, then moving on to your thesis, knowing that a thesis doesn't contain methods or quotations. We then identify 3 quotations and 3 methods, knowing that the analysis is the most important section, thinking about the effect. Then we always ensure we link back to the focus of the question throughout. Here's a useful graphic for this particular question. You begin with your thesis. That's the 1 sentence answering the question. It doesn't contain that method or the quotation. And your thesis makes sure that all your quotations and references are linked to this. So if we said, for example, the Tyrannosaurus Rex is a dangerous and fierce predator, all of our quotations, methods and effects would match up to this thesis. Then you have 3 quotations, and for each one you have a method and you have the effect. And remember, this is where you're going to get the marks, the comment on the effect. So here we have a reminder of the question. You now need to refer only to source A. So remember, there are 2 sources. We are just looking at source A. And we have the line numbers we need to look at, lines 27 to 40. How does the writer use language to describe the coal tips? The focus of the question being the coal tips. You can see here the line numbers are correct. We are looking at lines 27 to 40. You should now pause the video, read the extract and think about what references and quotations you would be using for this particular question. So on this slide here, we have a model response. To begin, we have a thesis. The writer presents the tip as a malicious presence. So the thesis doesn't need to be particularly long. You can see here it doesn't contain a method or a quotation, but it tells us the tip is malicious. That means that all the other 3 bits of evidence, methods and effect will link back to this overarching thesis. He uses personification as he describes the tip as a killer, which implies that it's a dark and threatening figure. The impression is further created when he refers to its rotten heart, making it appear as if the tip is purely evil force acting with intent. This also makes a link for the reader between the decay of the village and its build-up waste in the coal tips and the death that this causes. So you can quite clearly see here we have a thesis, we have a method. In fact, they're driving with the method here. We have a reference. We have some cross-referencing within the point, which is great. But most of all, we have detailed comments on the effect. So that concludes today's video on paper 2, question 3. You may want to rewatch this Beam Me Out video as we approach your exams.